Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mike Quinlan. I am the chair of the Dale Street School Building Committee. We did do a community forum a couple of weeks ago on project budget, but I know for those that weren't there, it was difficult to see some of the slides. So my right hand, Anna Mae O'Sheabrook, our Master of Communications, asked me to put together a quick video to walk the community through the budget. It's a very complicated topic, but I will try to make it as simple as possible, as I'm sure there will be lots of questions about it, and those can funnel through our communications group and as well through various ways to reach out to the SBC before town meeting. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Basic agenda to walk through is the project budget, how we get to our finalized project budget, what the tax impact will mean for residents of the town, and then some other next steps regarding town meeting. So this, again, probably still, even with this screen, still hard to see all the detail. We'll sort of go through line by line as much as we can, but this is the MSBA's, Mass School Building Authority's project budget, total project budget worksheet. It has a lot of varying line items that are required to be input by the design team and the OPM for the project and confirmed and finalized by the school building committee. And they also have a whole bunch of different calculations that they use to determine what their grant will be, because they cap off certain areas where they will only reimburse up to a certain amount. So you'll see a lot of different calculations off to the side of the budget that help fill in some of the numbers between what the budget is and what they will reimburse for. Again, this is sort of a continuation since it doesn't all fit on one sheet, but ultimately it comes down to a calculation down here which looks at the overall cost of the project and the contingencies involved, the total project budget at the bottom, and the maximum facilities grant. So right now we are at a $81.893 million project, total project budget. And that'll be what is voted on at town meeting with a maximum facilities grant. This has actually been updated by the MSBA since then. So this still has the old numbers from 2 weeks ago. But the maximum facilities grant is now 19.6 million. And so that leaves the town share with between 62.5 and $63 million for the town share. So some things that have changed in the MSBA recently, they now cap off the owner's project manager or OPM's fees and the designer fees. They used to be just capped based on 3.5% of construction and 10% of construction for OPM and designer. They now cap that with those same caps, but only up to $500 per square feet of construction costs. So more of those fees are now no longer reimbursable. They cap owner's contingency at 0.5% now. That used to be capped at 2%. An owner's contingency is basically some money to account for unforeseen things that occur along the way that may require design changes or things like that that were unanticipated. Demo and abatement. They are actually still working on how they are going to cap that moving forward because they will be coming up with a cap for demo and abatement, but that's not relevant for our project. Construction cap was recently raised, so that's a good thing. It went from $333 a square foot to $360 a square foot. When you factor in some of the other new caps on the design fees and OPM fees, that's offsetting some of the increase in the construction cap. So getting into a little bit more detail, the first part of the 3011 or the total project budget form is the feasibility study, and that's the phase we are in now. We allocated $1 million for this in 2018. It's been completely spent to date, but this is how we've paid our owner's project manager and our design team, as well as done some preliminary surveying and testing at different sites to get us to a point where we can vote on the project. The next section is the owner's project manager's fee for the next phases of the project. So if the project proceeds, there are future phases of design and then eventually construction, bidding, construction, and what's called closeout, which is basically once the building is open, finalizing all all warranties and owner's manuals and all this other things, final commissioning, and making sure that the building is operating properly, as well as some other costs for cost estimating, advertising, owner's insurance, permitting, etc. So there are some costs there. And over here, you'll see this is the scope of the OPM fees that are ineligible for reimbursement. So those all get calculated in with these side calculations. Next area on the sheet is the architecture and engineering basic services. Again, these are for the future phases of design, construction documents, bidding, construction administration, and closeout. And as well, for the design team's purposes, other reimbursable services like geotechnical borings and understanding the geotechnical for structural design, geoenvironmental, understanding if there's any hazardous materials, any site surveying that might be needed, and additional traffic studies. So that gives them their subtotal. They also have some portion of their fees that are ineligible. So those are what I highlighted over here. And then we start to get down into the construction side of it. The current approach would be to secure what's called a construction manager at risk. That would occur probably in early 2022. We would bring them on board, and they would perform pre-construction services, which basically they become part of the design team and are working with the design team closely, looking at constructability, looking at bidding strategies, looking at all sorts of things, cost estimating, as they are closely tied to the subcontractor market, and they will ultimately be the builder for the project. Getting further down into the actual cost of the work, this section here is all the construction budget. The MSBA uses what's called Uniformat. Uniformat is a way of breaking out all of the different trades of a construction project by system. So it starts off with what's called substructure. This includes any foundation work and the lowest floor slab. So basically the foundation of the building. The next section is called shell. So this is the superstructure, enclosure, exterior walls, exterior windows, doors, roofing, everything that it takes to enclose the building from the elements. Next section is interiors. This is all the interior construction. So all the interior walls, partitions, staircases, finishes, flooring, ceilings, things like that. Then the next system is services. This includes like elevator, plumbing, heating, air conditioning, fire protection, electrical, all of the services that the building needs to operate. The next section is called equipment and furnishings. These are pieces of equipment and furnishings that the contractor would be installing. Sometimes it's because they're required to be tied in directly to the building systems, hardwired, or hard affixed to the building. So that is the next section there. Then special construction and demolition. This would be if we were demolishing a building in its place, which we are not proposing. This would be if there were hazardous materials abatement in an existing building. So none of that affects this project. Next section is building site work. So this is all the site work around the building to prep for construction and then ultimately improve the site for athletic fields, playgrounds, parking, site utilities are in this section. So that's plumbing, fire protection, stormwater management, bringing electrical to the building, bringing plumbing to the building. All of that's included in the site work section. And as such, this is another area where the MSBA caps reimbursable costs at 8% of construction, which pretty much every project goes over unless it's sort of a real urban site with not a lot of site development that gets filled out entirely. But almost every project does go over that cap. So the question is by how much. So this basically says that this portion of the site work is non-reimbursable by the MSBA. That gives us a trade subtotal, which you'll see along this line. For our project, it's in the neighborhood of $48 million. Then we have what are called markups, or these are things that are not currently in the project right now, but that have to do with making sure, since we are asking to budget this for approval of this budget and this project at a time when the building is not completely designed, we have something called a design contingency. Design contingency basically says that those are the things that will be designed into the project that we're not aware of at this point, just because the project's not complete with design. There's a pricing contingency that's basically dealing with escalation. So as most people know, as time goes by, construction gets more expensive. Given that we would potentially be bidding this project next fall, we basically have to assume that the price today will go up between now and bidding. So we cover that with a contingency. Also included in this section are subcontractor bonds that ensure payment and performance, general conditions and requirements. That's the cost of doing the work for the construction manager, overhead and profit, insurance. These are, making sure that, proper insurances are in place, the fee that the contractor gets paid, and then what's called a GMP contingency. That's the contractor taking on some of the risk. They have a bucket there that pays for things that they weren't fully aware of at the time of the budget. And so all of that gets factored into those markups. And ultimately we end up with a construction budget which is just around $64.5 million currently. As you get down to the bottom of the total project budget, there's other miscellaneous things that are part of the project that we have to account for. Fees for utility company tie-ins, testing services. That means making sure that the project is being built properly and all of the materials are being properly installed and according to the specifications. Any temporary swing space or modulars, which we don't have on this project. And then miscellaneous costs for moving and things like that. So there are some miscellaneous project costs there. And then outside of that, the owner's responsibility for furniture, fixtures, and equipment and technology. These are all the loose items. Let's say, if you pick the building up and shook it, what would fall out? These are the types of things like desks for the kids, chairs for the kids, the teachers, and technology would be any, projectors or interactive screens, things like that the educators use to teach the kids. So we have a total project budget comes out at the bottom, and then we have the other contingencies that the owner uses, and we have a construction contingency that covers us for things that are unanticipated and that could potentially come up. There's no such thing as a zero change order project. Inevitably change orders come up, and we need some money to be able to allocate to those. And if we do a really good job, we don't spend all of that, and we have some money that we don't expend at the end. And the same goes for that owner's contingency we talked about a little bit before for the soft cost side of it, paying consultants to redesign or something like that that we're asking for changes that are outside of their current scope. So basically there becomes a range of, if we don't spend a dime of contingency versus if we spend all of it, and that gives us a range of what we will spend as a town and also what the MSBA will reimburse us for. When all is said and done, that gives us a total project budget of roughly 81.9 million. Out of that, we have already appropriated $1 million for the feasibility study, which means the total that will be requested at town meeting would be for the 80.9 million, recognizing that 19.6 of that will be potentially reimbursed by the MSBA should the project get approved. So where does that leave us in reference to other towns? This is something we've always looked at. We've put together a slide here. Many of these projects are in my office that we manage on a regular basis. Ashland is actually a project I'm working on right now. And we are just about to start construction on that project. But it gives you sort of a frame of reference of, are we way above and beyond what other towns are doing? Are we right in the sweet spot? Are we on the low end? And it's always tough to compare projects, but you want to make sure you're looking at all the relevant data. Not only are you looking at when the project is being bid, because that's when pricing is set, but what is the enrollment? What's the size of the building? Are they all net zero buildings like ours? And then, what are their construction costs? And one of the easiest ways to be able to compare is how much is each town spending per student for these types of projects. And Medfield's actually on the lower end. You'll see a couple that are a little bit lower, but including Ashland. But again, Ashland's starting construction this year, and we're going to be starting construction next year. So there's going to be some additional price increase between this year and next year that's projected, which is why they're on the lower end, about $6,000 per student less than us. Westwood is a really relevant project. Westwood is building a school very similar in size that's going to replace 2 of their elementary schools. And it is going to be about 560 students. Our proposed enrollment is 575. Again, those are maximum capacity enrollment. And their project is approximately 18,000 square feet larger than ours. So again, I think that, those are decisions that each town must make, but I think that shows how efficient we've been able to keep this building and not go above sort of just the minimum requirements that we need, with very few exceptions. So their project is an $87 million project versus our 82, a construction cost of 70 million versus our 64.5. And so you could see that they're up around 125,000 per student, and we're at 112. So I'm pretty sure we've got a very efficient building. I think we've made some really good decisions that put us in a place where we're not building something that is excessive. This is just a frame of reference of the school construction just in and around us. Many of these projects are in my office, including Walpole, Norwood, Westwood, 2 projects in Wellesley. Natick is coming close to completion. Ashland is just about to get started. Hopkinton, we built and that opened about 3 years ago. But other and Millis opened a couple years ago as well, the Clyde Brown Elementary. But this just gives you a frame of reference of how many school projects in the last couple of years in and around us, or are in design in and around us that are building these types of projects. So we're not alone. Oh, sorry, it's going the wrong way. All right, so to try to put this into a little bit more simpler format, we do have these slides. This does break out the line items, feasibility study, OPM fees we talked about, and all of the different line items that are included in that. Architecture and engineering fees for design and some of the sub-consultants that they bring on. Pre-construction services would be for the construction managers, fees before start of construction. Overall construction costs around 64.5 million. Those miscellaneous project costs we talked about for testing and utility company, FF&E and technology, and then contingencies. And as I touched on a little bit earlier, basically that leaves us with, sort of the low end and the high end, right? This would be, if we spent 0 money in contingencies, we would end up with a $77.5 million project, and approximate town share of 60 million. And then if we spend every single dime of contingency, we'd be at that 81.9. Again, this maximum total facilities grant actually went up recently. So that is now 19.6. So there's about $650,000 in additional reimbursement since the MSBA adjusted our reimbursement rate. So this would basically be around 62.5 million or so if we consumed every dollar of contingency. So what does that mean for each of us, and how that's going to impact our taxes? The selectmen still are looking at a couple of different scenarios for bonding. And you can think of it as similar to a mortgage, but a little bit different. I'll walk you through that a little bit. Scenario one would be a 30-year bond with what's called a level principal payment, which means you basically take the total principal and divide it by 30, and that's your payment every year. So if we're at, say, 60 million, just for ease of math, would be 2 million a year in principal. And then the interest, obviously the first year is the highest, and then it tapers towards the end as that principal gets paid off. So as of the current projection from our bond advisors is that a 30-year bond, we would expect to get around 2.25% in interest rate. And if the average assessed value in Medfield is a $692,000 home, that basically means that if you take your valuation, whether it's 692 or more or less, you're looking at $1.23 per thousand of assessed value. So if you're lucky enough to have a home that's assessed at $1 million even, that means your price, your tax increase in the first year would be $1,230, and then tapering from there. So, but for that average assessed value of 692, the year one increase would be $852, reducing each year to year 30, and year 30 would be about $520 paid towards this project alone. Again, these are just for this project. So the average over that 30-year period is about $686 per year of debt exclusion tax, or the tax dedicated to the debt exclusion and the debt service. This will be offset by some other debt that's going to be rolling off the books within about 2 years if this project gets approved. This debt is from the high school, middle school memorial projects way back about 20 years ago. That debt is rolling off the books. So the amount that this theoretical average assessed value home in Medfield pays towards that debt right now is $117. So that helps to mitigate at least some of the tax burden that'll be borne by this project. Scenario two is basically doing a 20-year bond instead of a 30-year. This would be at 1.75%. It's usually about a half a point delta between those two. And this basically means paying more upfront and over a shorter period of time. You would basically be able to reduce the overall interest you pay, obviously by a shorter duration and a lower interest rate, but it means taking more of a hit on a year-to-year basis to absorb that payment in less time. So this would be a $1.49 per thousand of assessed value. So the year one increase would be $1,030, reducing each year over the 20 years to the final year of year 20 at $776, which makes an average over those 20 years of $903. Still with that 117 rolling off the books in about 2 years. All right, so I hope that helps a little bit. Obviously, there's some next steps that need to be taken in order to get this project approved. The first of which is a board meeting. The MSBA will vote on the project and basically sort of cap our total grant at that point. And then the town would then need to approve the project for it to proceed forward. And so we do have another community forum coming up at the end of the month, just before town meeting, to give people more opportunity to ask questions and be informed prior to town meeting. Town meeting is scheduled for November 7th at noon at the high school. We're still working out logistics. The selectmen are still working out logistics with the moderator and town administrator. So expect to hear more on that shortly. And the ballot vote, I believe, is no longer tentative. I believe that is set as November 15th. So special town meeting, the project needs to be approved by the town by a 2/3 supermajority. And November 15th is a ballot vote, and that is just a simple majority, or 50% plus one vote. in order for the project to get approved. But it's important to understand that there are 2 steps to that process, that it's not just town meeting, it's not just a ballot vote, but it's both. And both need to show that support for this project to proceed. So obviously, these are all ways to contact us. We have an email address. The website has a lot of great information, but it's tens of thousands of hours worth of work. So it's not something that we would expect anyone to be able to jump right in and understand right off the bat. This is obviously a very, very complex project that's been developed over almost 3 years now. And it's certainly one where I think people are going to have questions, lots of questions. And we want to make sure we answer as many as we can before town meetings so that people are as informed as possible. So I hope that helps a little bit. I'm going to toss this little video over to Anna Mae for distribution, but I'm sure there will be more questions coming, and hopefully more conversations, so people can really make an informed decision. And with that, I hope everyone has a great day, and we'll see you at town meeting, I hope.